I'm a huge fan of JRPGs, and honestly, it's kind of a shame how so many modern releases just don't capture the same magic that older JRPGs had. When I think JRPG, I think of certain core elements: turn-based combat, story-driven adventures, and meaningful character arcs that actually grow and change over time. Classic JRPGs usually revolve around a main party of characters, each built around clear archetypes: your healer, mage, tank, thief, or warrior. And what really draws me in is watching those characters bounce off of each other, build relationships, and sometimes even fall apart. That emotional connection, it's part of what makes the journey so memorable. There's also the gameplay loop, leveling through combat, or upgrading gear, and chasing that sense of constant progression. Most of these games are rooted in fantasy settings, though there are exceptions. Take Wild Arms with its cowboy western flair, or Art Netalico's unique twist on sci-fi fantasy. These days, instead of new classic style JRPGs, we're seeing a wave of remakes and remasters, such as Final Fantasy VII Remake, Persona 3 Reload, and Star Ocean: The Second Story R. Honestly, I don't mind it. Games like Octopath Traveler prove that you can still tap into that old school energy, whether it's through HD 2D visuals or traditional storytelling, and create something truly special without chasing photorealism. But if I had to pick a favorite era of JRPGs, the PS2 era. Maybe that's just nostalgia talking, since I grew up with it. But the deeper I dig, the more I realize how many JRPGs from that era I completely missed. Some that I've never even heard of. So that got me thinking, what if I went back and played every single PS2 JRPG in order of release? That's the idea behind the series, and I'll be using jrpgc.com, a community curated database of JRPGs, as my master list. I'm not here to gatekeep what is or isn't a JRPG, so I'm just sticking with the games they've included. For games with enhanced versions like Persona 3 versus Persona 3 FES, I'll be playing the improved one, since there's no reason for me to suffer through the same game twice if I don't have to. Whether I uncover a forgotten gem, stumble into a hidden disaster, or revisit a timeless classic, I'm here to see how well these games actually hold up today and share that journey with you. The first title in this journey is Eternal Ring, a first-person action RPG developed by FromSoftware. Released on October 26, 2000, it launched alongside the PlayStation 2, stepping onto a stage shared by other technical showpieces of the next console generation. Back then, FromSoftware wasn't yet the titan we associate with the Soulsborne legacy. No Souls, no Sekiro, no Elden Ring. In 2000, they were still exploring who they wanted to be. Eternal Ring was only their fourth major release, following the King's Field series, Armored Core, and Frame Guide. It arrived in a gaming landscape still shifting out of the fifth generation, where experimentation and technical spectacle often took precedence over polish or cohesion. And Eternal Ring feels exactly like that, an experiment. A rough sketch of ideas that FromSoftware would later revisit and refine. You play as Kane Morgan, a young knight sent to the enigmatic island of no return to uncover the truth behind the mysterious Eternal Ring. The perspective is first person, and the gameplay leans heavily into dungeon crawling and magical crafting, concepts that feel both archaic and fascinating in hindsight. Critics at the time weren't exactly impressed by Eternal Ring. IGN noted the innovative ring combination magic system, but lamented the dated visuals and stiff presentation. RPG fan appreciated the ambition, but couldn't ignore the simplistic story structure. GameSpot acknowledged technical improvements over Kingsfield, but pointed out Kane's flat characterization and the awkward NPC interactions. So here we are, decades later, revisiting a game that many wrote off as a footnote, a launch curiosity at best. But was Eternal Ring really just a tech demo in disguise? Or was there something more beneath the surface, a glimpse into the kind of world building and systems-driven design FromSoftware would later master? Let's take a closer look. Booting up Eternal Ring today, you're greeted with something brief, almost forgettable at first glance, but it lingers. A blonde man approaches a stone gazebo nestled in the middle of a lake. He picks up a radiant, glowing ring, and before there's time to wonder what it means, a dragon streaks across the sky. It swoops towards him, just as the ring in his hand begins to glow intensely, and then fade to black. Title screen. It's minimalist, even crude by modern standards, but there's a quiet charm to it. The kind of opening that breathes just enough mystery into the world to pull you in, a question without an answer. I've always appreciated games that offer this kind of intro, not the bombastic, exposition-laden monologues, but the quiet ones, the ones that trust you to wander. Growing up, these kinds of title sequences stuck with me. Sometimes they offered exposition, other times they were more like tone poems, and sometimes even full-on anime openings. Vignettes meant to immerse you before you even press start. Starting a new game, we get more traditional backstory. We're introduced to our protagonist, Kane Morgan, a young man plagued by haunting dreams of a scorched homeland. His country, Socia, left in ruins. His parents, lost to flame. Socia was invaded by the neighboring kingdom of Aldine. The first time I played, I'll admit, I barely registered this. I skimmed past the dialogue, assuming it was the kind of flavor text that would reveal itself later. In retrospect, I wish I paid more attention, because while the game doesn't beat you over the head with exposition, it does reinforce these ideas, if you're willing to pay attention. The story isn't handed to you. It waits for you to connect the pieces, although the story is quite rudimentary when compared to future FromSoftware titles. We're introduced to Hungaria, the continent's dominant kingdom, and its young king, Ian. When news of the missing expeditions reaches him, Ian sends his trusted subordinate, Gillian Morgan, to investigate. And here the story takes an unexpected turn. Gillian is Kane's father. At first, the review feels off. If Kane's parents were lost in the fire, what's his father doing alive and serving the king? The game never quite answers that, and maybe it doesn't need to. There's a faint suggestion that Kane might be adopted, or that the memories he clings to are more symbolic than literal. Kane, like so many others, is sent across the sea, though the reasons are obscured even to him. His destination is the island of no return, a place shrouded in myth and marked by the silence of failed expeditions. Somewhere on that island lies an artifact of immense power, the Eternal Ring. And so, under royal decree and familial duty, Kane is chosen to retrieve it. Alone, uncertain, and carrying the burden of nations and bloodlines alike, Kane sets sail towards a land no one has ever returned from. And just like that, the journey begins. Kane's journey begins not with a grand procession or triumphant music, but with quiet uncertainty. He's ferried to the island of no return by a lone, weathered fisherman, a man who speaks of this island with casual dread, like it's just another cursed place on the map. No pomp, no prophecy. Just a man dropping off cargo he doesn't want to stick around for. As the boat drifts toward the island's shores, the air is still. But that stillness is short-lived. Just as the fisherman prepares to leave, a dragon descends from the clouds, swooping in with violent intent. There's no fight, no defense. Just chaos off-screen as the camera cuts away, leaving us alone on this haunted coast. It's a blink and you miss it moment, but it sticks. A quiet reminder that this isn't a typical fantasy adventure. The island rejects familiarity. Even arrival is met with death. From there, Kane steps into a dark cave, and control is handed over to the player, and that's where Eternal Ring reveals its age. The moment you take control, it hits you. The game doesn't play like you'd expect from a PS2 title. Instead, it feels like a relic from the generation before, a carryover from King's Field era, where patience wasn't a virtue, it was a requirement. Melee attacks are mapped to the triangle button. Forward and backward movement is done via the D-pad, up to move forward, down to backpedal. Left and right rotate your character, not strafe. Strafing, for some reason, is relegated to the shoulder buttons, L1 and R1, and vertical camera movement, that's L2 and R2. And perhaps the most baffling decision of all, the game completely ignores the PS2's dual analog sticks. Both are non-functional. Eternal Ring treats the PS2 controller like it's still 1995. It brought me back to the days playing Monster Hunter on the PSP. That was a game with only one analog stick, and to compensate, players developed the infamous claw grip technique, contorting their fingers to manage movement and camera at the same time. It was painful, sure, but it worked. With Eternal Ring, I found myself longing for even that workaround. The camera is stubborn, movement is clunky, combat feels like steering a shopping cart through sand. I eventually settled on Control Type C, which consolidates all movement to the D-pad. Not great, but slightly less terrible. Even 10 hours in, I was still fumbling with the controls, especially when trying to look up or down in the middle of a fight. I kept thinking, if I had 2 extra hands, maybe this would make sense, but I don't, and I doubt Kane does either. Still, Once you stop fighting the controls and start accepting them, the UI itself is refreshingly minimal. A health bar and magic bar rest at the top of the screen. Pressing start opens a clean yet nostalgic menu where you can view equipment and stats. Stat management is basic early on. No cryptic scaling formulas, no hidden modifiers, just a simple rule of thumb: bigger numbers are better. And in a way, that simplicity is kind of comforting. It's a game that doesn't hide its mechanics, they're just buried beneath some very 2000 era design choices. Wandering through the cave's damp, echoing corridors, I eventually stumbled across a small shrine, a moment of quiet amid the tension. This, as it turns out, is how you save your progress. There's no fanfare, no tutorial, just a pedestal that you intuitively understand is sacred, functional, vital. Not long after, I encountered my first real threat. Isahagin, an aquatic lizard-like creature patrolling the waterlogged tunnels. I approached, sword raised, expecting the kind of encounter you'd find in most early RPGs. Hit the enemy, watch it flinch, rinse and repeat, but then it dodged. I actually paused for a second. The enemy had responded to me, actively avoiding the attack, and it threw me off more than I expected. Maybe it's because I wasn't deeply familiar with old dungeon crawlers, or maybe I was conditioned to expect static foes in launch-era games, but that dodge felt deliberate, alive. It reminded me of something FromSoftware would later become known for: reactive enemies, systems that reward patience, observation, and timing. It was a small moment, but it foreshadowed the design language they'd go on to refine over the next 2 decades. Combat, at this age, is primitive but workable. You can move while swinging your sword, which becomes the core strategy. Press forward, mash attack, and hope your timing's good. Then came the second enemy, a massive mosquito buzzing just out of reach. Frustrated by my grounded attacks, I tried something desperate. I leapt into the water to chase it down. Bad call. In Eternal Ring, water may as well be molten lava. Step in and you die instantly. No damage animation, no dramatic drowning scene, just a black screen and a cold return to the title screen. There are no checkpoints, no autosaves, only that last shrine you touched if you even remembered to use it. It's brutal, but in a strange way I respected it. This wasn't just difficulty for its own sake, it was a reminder, a design choice that taught you to fear the world, to learn its rules, to listen. The cave itself, meanwhile, is a maze in miniature. Tunnels twist vertically and horizontally, splitting off into dead ends, looping back on themselves. There's no map, just your memory and your patience. It took me several laps before I finally found the exit, and when I did, I wasn't relieved so much as humbled. Eternal Ring doesn't reward you for playing quickly, it rewards you for surviving. Emerging from the cave, I arrived at a small camp, a pocket of civilization amidst the chaos. The cave walls gave way to a small outpost, a humble cluster of buildings nestled in a patch of bright green grass. And after so much gray stone and flickering torchlight, just seeing color, real, vibrant color, was almost euphoric. For a PS2 launch title, the visuals here genuinely caught me off guard. The camp wasn't lavish, but it was alive. It wasn't much, but after that lonely cave, it felt almost homey. A fragile pocket of civilization holding its breath. Inside one of the larger buildings, I met Evans, the acting assistant captain. That title stuck out to me. Acting assistant? What happened to the actual assistant captain? It's one of those odd, possibly unintentional quirks that adds to the atmosphere. Something's off here, even if no one says it out loud. Evans informed me that to be officially accepted into the ranks, I'd need the captain's approval. In the meantime, he politely relieved me of my sword and sent me off to a man named Wallace to get a replacement. Now naturally, I did what any good and experienced player would do. I explored every building and every corner of the camp. Along the way, I met a handful of interesting characters, each one strange in their own understated way. There was the silver-haired warrior lounging lazily on a tree stump, too sleepy to care about much of anything. Marie Fowler, the camp's chief medic, offered healing free of charge, a rare kindness in a world that kills you for touching water. And then there was the gatekeeper, who welcomed me with warmth, immediately mocking me for being too young to survive out here. But no Wallace. I retraced my steps, rechecked every building. Eventually, I found him tucked away behind what I can only describe as a fake wall. It looked more part of the background than an actual door, and when I finally spoke to Wallace, he refused to hand over a weapon. Instead, he launched into exposition about the Eternal Ring. Only after I remembered to use the requisition form Evans had given me directly from my inventory, did he begrudgingly hand me a dagger. A dagger. Weaker than the sword they just taken from me. And just to twist the knife further, figuratively, thankfully, Wallace opened shop and there it was. The very same sword they took away from me. Listed for 8 gems. I wasn't just underprepared, I was insulted. So, with a dual dagger in hand and a bruised ego, I stepped past the sneering gate guard and walked into the unknown. No map, no real guidance. The water shrine was the first place that genuinely made me pause, not for danger, but for atmosphere. Smooth stone walls reflected soft aqua hues. After slogging through dim, claustrophobic caves and mud-covered camps, it felt serene, almost sacred. And then I met the crabs. Tiny, unassuming, and surprisingly annoying. Because of the way Eternal Ring handles camera controls, I had to angle the view down just to land a proper hit. Simple task in theory. In practice, a whole boss fight against the shoulder buttons. It was here, again, that I felt the weight of the game's archaic control scheme. Every fight became a negotiation between intention and execution. Still, I approached the dungeon the same way I approach every JRPG, compulsively. No room left unexplored, no hallway unentered, because somewhere, hidden in a corner, might be a treasure chest holding a god-tier item that I will absolutely never use, saving it just in case until the credits roll. Fighting through more Sahagins and a few crab clusters, Kane began to level up, and with each level, he grew just a bit tougher. Not noticeably, but enough to keep going. Along the way, I started encountering strange sealed doors. Blue door, the game told me. Just those 2 words. No explanation, no hint. And yes, I also found a red door, boldly red, equally unhelpful. Eventually, I also came across doors sealed by ice, and near them, a treasure chest, calling my name faintly. My reward? The Fireball Ring. Magic in Eternal Ring is mapped to the square button, with spell cycling on circle. The small bar you see above your HP and MP bar, that's your cooldown indicator, which, until now, I'd mistaken for UI decoration. Suddenly, things were clicking into place. With fire magic in hand, I hit a switch that drained water from parts of the dungeon. I also utilized the Fireball Ring to melt the doors that were once sealed by ice, opening new paths. I also found a Ring of Magic, something that would prove to be useful later on. The enemies evolved too. Plant monsters started to appear, and initially I panicked, remembering how stepping into water earlier meant instant death. But I quickly discovered that shallow water was safe, and that alone felt like a win. Deeper into the shrine, I found another save point, a glowing shrine nestled in silence. And anyone who's played a FromSoftware game knows what this means. A boss is near. The boss arena was beautiful. A wide circular chamber, flooded with ankle-deep water. Thematically perfect, not just in design, but in mood. Kane enters in a brief cutscene. A large Sahagin, eyes glowing red, watches silently before leaping into the arena with a practiced menace. I was ready. I'd been surprised by normal enemies dodging my attacks, so I expected this fight to be a genuine challenge. I immediately unleashed what I thought was an unstoppable combo. The boss sidestepped repeatedly. Each fireball sailed harmlessly past, splashing into the water behind him. In fairness, it was a water-themed boss. Maybe fire magic wasn't the best call. Still, I had to improvise. The Sahagin's moves were straightforward but effective. A fast glide attack where he skimmed across the arena in a straight line. A stationary bubble attack, during which he'd become vulnerable to my slow magic. That second move became the key. Hitting him right after his bubble phase let my spells finally connect. I also learned that if you just get in close and cast a fireball in his face, he doesn't really have the time to dodge. Between well-timed fireballs and a few close-range sword swings, I eventually brought him down. He dropped the Ring of Insight, a surprisingly generous reward that increases experience gain while equipped. After the battle, I continued onward, where a shining blue key awaited. The moment I picked it up, the water began to shift. A dragon emerged, watery, ethereal, and speaking in fragmented, stuttering language. It spoke of Socia, of time running out, of someone named Lyla, and just as suddenly, it vanished back beneath the surface. Cryptic, yet intriguing. The kind of narrative breadcrumb that Eternal Ring loves to drop, without ever telling you if you'll find the trail again. I used the key to unlock one of those blue doors from earlier, creating a shortcut. After fighting a few more enemies and scooping up stray loot, I made my way back, bruised, baffled, and just a little bit wiser. Returning to camp after the water shrine, I expected some kind of reprieve, a chance to regroup, restock, maybe talk to familiar faces. Instead, I walked into a massacre. The rude knights who mocked me at the gate, dead. Wallace, the man who swindled me, who tried to sell me back my own sword, dead. Evans, the acting assistant captain with his mysterious job title, dead. Marie, the gentle healer who offered kindness in a world otherwise devoid of it, alive, but only for a moment. Gasping through shallow breaths, she uttered a final warning before succumbing to her wounds. Only one person remained alive, but wounded. The silver-haired warrior I'd seen lounging earlier. The man who did this was the captain, twisted by some unseen force, corrupted into a monstrous form. His voice, or what was left of it, echoed the name Eternal Ring before he flew off into the sky, leaving devastation in his wake. The tone of the game shifted here, decisively. What was once a curious, slightly awkward adventure now carried the weight of tragedy. FromSoftware, even in its early years, knew how to turn safety into sorrow. I pushed onwards, trying to make sense of it, only to be immediately trapped by fallen debris and ambushed by a werewolf-like creature. The fight was chaotic. The beast zigzagged erratically, dodging fireballs with ease. Every spell I launched seemed to land just behind it, but eventually I learned its patterns and I struck. A few quick hits and it collapsed. Afterwards, Kane, now the sole survivor of the camp, quietly adds new gravestones to the small plot just outside. He says nothing. No dramatic monologue, no inner reflection, just a simple act of remembrance. He continues his journey without fanfare. The Eternal Ring still waits. With the water key in hand, I returned to the blue doors I had previously been locked out of. They opened now, revealing a deeper passage that led to another shrine, though this one felt different, less earthly, more sacred. Inside, I found something strange. A pad of some sort. Stepping onto it, Kane was teleported into an entirely different space. A suspended chamber where an elderly man floated silently in midair. This was no boss fight, no dialogue tree, just the calm voice of an ancient being offering knowledge. He explained that through the submission of gems, he could awaken the latent power of my rings, enhancing them, reshaping their effects. This was the beginning of a new system, a crafting mechanic that would become central to the game's identity. The fusion of old magic and customization, a system that, while clunky at first, hinted at the modular depth that FromSoftware would later come to master in more recognizable forms. And it was delivered not through a menu prompt, but by a floating old man in an empty void. If Eternal Ring has one system that genuinely sets it apart, it's the ring crafting. And not just as a gameplay feature, it's practically the soul of the entire experience. But like many things in early FromSoftware design, it's a soul that you have to dig for. At its core, the crafting system revolves around two ingredients: magic rings and gems, which are primarily acquired through monster drops. Each gem comes with a level, ranging from 1 to 5. Here's how the system actually works once you peel back the mystery. The first gem you place, all the way on the left, determines the element of the ring. The total combined level of all 6 gems determines the tier or strength of the ring. You can insert up to 6 gems, which opens the door to a surprising amount of depth, assuming you know what you're doing. Though the game never actually tells you this, you're expected to intuit it, or more likely to stumble into a guide like I eventually did. My first dozen attempts at crafting could best be described as hopeful chaos. I tossed in gems at random, trusting my instincts and assuming the game would reward creativity. Spoiler, it didn't. But eventually, after some forum diving and a few too many wasted resources, I started to understand how it all fit together. One of my favorite early discoveries was the Wind Cutter spell, a fast, piercing projectile that I relied on for much of the game. It wasn't flashy, but it was efficient. What surprised me even more was that the crafting system didn't stop at just elemental magic. There were attribute rings too. These didn't require a magic ring at all, just gems. And their effects were passive, stat boosts, bonus effects like increased experience gain, or increased attributes. The Ring of Insight, for example, quietly became one of my most valuable finds, rewarding me just for wearing it. But as with everything in Eternal Ring, there's a catch. The game explains none of this, no tutorials, no in-game documentation, just a glowing outer and the quiet expectation that you'll figure it out. I didn't fully grasp the intricacies of the system until well into the game, and even then my internal logic boiled down to strong gems equals strong spells. Not exactly the most refined approach. Then there's the matter of the elements themselves, not just fire and wind, but earth, water, light, and dark. The first four are fairly accessible, the last two practically mythical. I think I found maybe 3 light or dark gems in my entire playthrough. Maybe, if I was lucky. So yeah, don't expect to be crafting holy judgment beams or black hole incantations anytime soon. And to complicate things further, magic rings, the base requirements for all spell crafting, are limited. You only find a set number throughout the game. Once they're gone, they're gone. Although you can reuse other rings like the fireball ring, so you did have a choice to constantly reset them. And while yes, you can reload your save before crafting to undo a bad result, but that kind of feels like cheating yourself out of the tension. The resource management, the risk. Still, when the system works, it works. There's a genuine thrill in seeing a new spell animation for the first time. Even the lower tier spells feel impactful, largely because of how much work goes into making them. You earn your magic in Eternal Ring, and that alone gives it weight. So no, it's not intuitive, it's not user-friendly, but it's interesting. And for a 2000 PS2 launch title, that alone puts it ahead of its time. After a brief detour into the ring crafting menu, where I managed to forge a protection ring, which, according to its description, protects me from something. I also crafted my first water-based healing spell, Healing Water. It wasn't flashy, but it meant that I could finally patch myself up without relying on Marie's now absent kindness. Feeling marginally more prepared, I pressed forward and found myself entering a new area, a stretch of crumbling ruins, dilapidated walkways, fractured platforms, and just enough narrow ledges to make every step feel like a calculated risk. Gone was the soft palette of the water shrine. These ruins were jagged, dangerous, and strangely beautiful. It wasn't long before I met a new character, a man I mentally dubbed Turban Man. Not exactly a lore-accurate name, but it worked. He was surprisingly friendly, a rare break from the game's usual cryptic silence. He handed me another protection ring and warned me about the poison-filled valley ahead, a place where apparently several other groups from the mainland had already ventured into. Before he could say much more, an earthquake rocked the island. He cautioned me not to cross the bridge leading into the forest just yet, claiming that I wasn't strong enough, not yet anyways, and something about the way he said it, I believed him. So instead of pressing into the unknown, I turned toward the valley. Not because the game told me to, not because a quest marker pointed the way, but because he said it might be safer, and in Eternal Ring, that's guidance enough. These kinds of encounters, small, unforced moments of narrative, are what give the game its unique texture. There's no glowing arrow pointing you to the next cutscene, no booming narrator laying out the stakes. Instead, you're fed the story piece by piece through fragmented dialogue, strange characters, and the slow, methodical unfolding of the world around you. It's not elegant, it's not always coherent, but it's intentional. And looking back, you can see the early strands of FromSoftware DNA beginning to emerge. The cryptic NPCs, the environmental storytelling, the quiet sense that something greater is happening just beyond your understanding. All the ingredients are here, still raw, still unrefined, but unmistakably present. In its awkward, ambitious way, Eternal Ring whispers the same thing FromSoftware's best games later would. Before setting foot into the poison-ridden valley that Turban Man had so ominously warned me about, I did what any cautious adventurer would. I cast Protect. And for a while, it worked. For a while. Eventually, the spell wore off, and without missing a beat, the poison crept in. Subtle, inevitable. I was slowly dying again. Of course I was. Because let's be honest, it wouldn't be a true FromSoftware experience without a dedicated poison zone. That classic misery-laced biome where every step feels like a mistake, and every healing spell barely keeps the bar from turning green again. But I pushed forward, because what else do you do in these games? Along the way, I stumbled across the remains of a fallen traveler, a quiet, unceremonious discovery. No dramatic cutscene, just a body and a small amulet tucked among the remains. There was something almost comforting about it, a minor treasure, a sliver of progress. The valley stretched on, long, winding, grueling, with no clear direction, no shortcuts, and no sense of mercy. Every inch was a test of patience, but like so much of Eternal Ring, it wasn't designed to thrill. It was designed to wear you down, to see if you'd still press forward when the world clearly didn't want you to. Eventually, I emerged from the sludge and stone into something unexpected. A tree hideout of some sorts. Sunlight filtered through the canopy. After the valley, it felt almost magical, like surfacing for air after being underwater for too long. The world was beginning to open up, revealing that Eternal Ring was more than just dark caves and damp shrines. It was layered, expanding, slowly, stubbornly, and with a sense of wonder tucked between its rough edges. Stepping into the tree hideout, I was immediately greeted by a familiar sight. A man asleep on the ground near the entrance. In most games, this would be an NPC you would wake up with a button prompt or a cutscene, so I hit him with a wind cutter. Naturally, he didn't stir. Whether immune to magic or just really committed to the nap, he stayed down. Deeper into the hideouts, I encountered a more responsive figure. A brown-haired man who questioned me the moment I stepped into his space. He mentioned the name Lyla, which immediately caught my attention. The water dragon had mentioned her too, in that broken, cryptic way that made everything sound vaguely prophetic. Whoever Lyla is, she's important, possibly central, maybe even the key to the island's entire mystery. Turns out, this man is a merchant, a rare breed in Eternal Ring. He sells healing items, antidotes, and mostly an actual weapon. That alone makes him a saint in this economy. But let's be realistic, I'm not hiking all the way back here every time I need potions. The Eternal Ring fast travel system is called walking, and the world does not make that easy. The merchant feels like everyone else I've met on this island, stuck, hopeful, but slowly unraveling. He speaks of Lyla like she might hold a solution, a way off this god-forsaken place. But there's no urgency in his tone, just a quiet resignation of someone waiting for a rescue that may never come. After stocking up on supplies, because God knows what's coming next, I leave the safety of the hideout and step towards the path Turban Man had warned me about from the very beginning, the dreaded forest. And if the last Poison Valley was any indication, I had every reason to be nervous. And wow, Turban Man wasn't kidding. The moment I stepped into the forest, things got chaotic fast. I did what felt natural in an RPG. Tried to clear out a beehive. Easy XP, right? That's when the real bee showed up. A massive one, faster, angrier, and more aggressive than anything I'd fought so far. It chased me in circles like I owed it money, and I realized quickly that Eternal Ring had officially entered its don't get too comfortable phase. Then came the lizard men, armed with swords, fast, relentless. They hit like trucks, and one of them dropped me instantly. But after some trial and error, and a few returns to the shrine, I started to find my rhythm. I learned their patterns, got more precise, and slowly pushed forward. I began defeating them regularly, collecting more gems, leveling up, and carving out a fragile sense of momentum. Eventually, I returned to the tree hideout to stock up again, and that's when I noticed something new. The sleeping man near the entrance, the one I tried to wake up with a wind cutter, was finally awake. Talking to him revealed something unexpected. The amulet I'd found back in the Poison Valley, it belonged to one of his fallen comrades, a soldier who had slipped and fallen to his death. Without hesitation, I returned it to him, a small gesture, a keepsake for a grieving family. In return, he gave me something far more valuable, information. He told me the path to the island's deeper regions lies through a hole in the valley, but once I dropped down, there'd be no coming back, a one-way descent. He also mentioned that he had given the same advice to another traveler, a gray-haired swordsman in brown armor. It had to be the same man who was defeated by the corrupted captain back at the camp. Before making that leap into the unknown, I took one last walk through the forest. No enemies, no objectives, just space. A moment to breathe, to let the world sink in. There's something magical about exploration in games. Sometimes it's about what you find. A new ring, a rare item, a piece of lore. But sometimes it's just the act itself. That feeling of stumbling across something unexpected. Something the game didn't highlight or flash in your face. Just you and the world, quietly interacting. Growing up, I didn't really get to play these kind of games firsthand. I had 4 brothers, 3 of them older, and I mostly experienced games through their eyes. I remember my brother drawing dungeon maps by hands on sheets of paper, grid by grid. It was raw, honest, Before auto maps and online guides, that's how you navigated, by feeling, by memory, by failing. He also collected official strategy guides, those thick, glossy books filled with gorgeous character art, exhaustive item lists, and bestiaries I could stare at for hours. I didn't play most of the games in those guides, but I knew their worlds. I knew the monsters, the spell names, the equipment rarities. In a way, I lived those games without ever touching the controller. And I think back to those moments often, all of us huddled together in my oldest brother's tiny room, passing the controller around, arguing, laughing, helping each other through boss fights. Looking back, I appreciate him more than I ever said. So much of Eternal Ring feels like that era, when progress wasn't handed to you, when you had to earn it, or share it, when maps were memories, not menus. Eventually, I knew it was time. Time to leave the forest. Time to descend into the island's deeper, more dangerous truths. And before I knew it, I stopped by the shopkeeper one last time. And wouldn't you know it, he handed me a rapier, right after I'd bought a new sword from him. Thanks, I guess? Dropping into the valley's deep pit, I expected danger, maybe some ancient temple or long-forgotten ruins. Instead, vomit-colored cave walls. I was back in the cave, and not the cozy kind, if that even exists. The iron mines are immediately oppressive, walls painted in sickly yellows and browns, like the game was trying to make the player uncomfortable before anything had even attacked. Near the entrance, I spotted a sleeping dragon, and as is tradition, I attempted to wake it up with magic. Nothing, not even a twitch. Shrugging, I pressed on, deeper into the maze of tunnels that quickly blurred together into a homogeneous labyrinth. New monsters appeared almost immediately. The first were orc-like brutes, slow, aggressive, all muscle, no subtlety. Then came spirits that hovered at a distance, launching magical projectiles. At first, I assumed they were immune to spells, but eventually I realized it wasn't resistance, it was just bad hit detection. My spells just sailed right past their bizarre, janky hitboxes. Later on, I met something more impressive, a stone golem, towering and imposing. It was immune to magic this time for real, but even it had a weakness. Circle strafe behind it, stab it in the back, repeat. Tactical brilliance. This section also introduced new status effects, broadening the ways the game could ruin your day. Curse, which is as far as I could tell, did nothing but make the screen flash an aggressive purple. Silence, which disabled your use of magic. Paralysis, which slowed your movement to a crawl, and quickly became my most hated affliction. It didn't kill you, it just wasted your time, which somehow felt worse. Compared to the initial Waterfall Cave, this place felt like its meaner, more spiteful older sibling. The walls blended together so thoroughly that backtracking was a nightmare. Every corner felt identical, every fork in the path gave me deja vu. I started using monster density as a compass. Did I fully explore the area? Honestly, I couldn't tell you. After a while, I just wanted out. And then, just when I was ready to break, I stumbled onto something familiar, the silver-haired swordsman, the same quiet warrior we met way back at the camp, now somehow sitting, once again, on a tree stump that had inexplicably followed him into the mines. We talked. He revealed that he was hunting the captain, not to save him, but to stop him, permanently if needed. He explained that the Socian people, Kane's own ancestors, once lived on this island. They were destroyed 2 decades ago, along with their civilization. They once wielded the Eternal Ring, which housed an energy he called the Eternal Power. He looked at Kane and noticed something I suspected for a while. His affinity with magic might not be random, it might be bloodline. Kane may be Socian, a descendant of the people who once held dominion here. He also mentioned Lyla again, the mysterious woman spoken of by the water dragon, now said to be traveling with a masked man. A pair caught up in this island's mystery, perhaps even steering it. And then, the swordsman stood up, wished me luck, and walked off into the shadows of the mine. No dramatic camera pan, no boss music, just a calm, quiet exit. And it might be one of the coolest, most understated character departures I've ever seen in a game.
Live. I wish you luck.
Delving deeper into the island, the first thing the game throws at you is what it very generously calls a puzzle. In reality, it's just a series of wall switches that activate moving platforms. each more redundant than the last. You don't solve it once, you repeat it over and over and over, about 10 times. Eventually, the caves open up into a larger structure, complete with a moving conveyor belt suspended over lava. Then something unexpected happened. I stepped through a side room, and there he was, the silver-haired swordsman, the one who'd follow us through so much of the game, the one with a personal vendetta against the corrupted captain. Dead. No final battle, no grand moment, just gone, slumped over. I even double-checked. Yep, definitely dead. And I didn't expect that. He always felt like a character with a purpose, someone we'd eventually fight beside. Someone whose path would intertwine with ours in some climactic way. But Eternal Ring doesn't play by those rules. He simply wasn't strong enough. That was the end of his story. At this point, almost every major character we've met has died. The camp wiped out. The warrior gone. It's a grim pattern, but fitting in a way. This is the island of no return after all. The name wasn't just mood setting, it was foreshadowing. Pushing onwards, I encountered a new kind of enemy, a red-clad swordsman. This guy meant business. He hit me with a seal spell, disabling my magic, and forced me into a one-on-one melee duel. And I'll be honest, he kicked my ass, but I kicked his even harder on the rematch, so we're good. Then, finally, a real puzzle. One that asked something of me. A series of shifting platforms had to be activated in sequence to reach a central lever, with a timer forcing you to move quickly and plan ahead. I'd love to say I solved it with careful strategy and deep insight, but really, I just pressed buttons and hoped for the best, and somehow it worked. Pulling the lever redirected lava flows and opened new paths forward. I wandered for a while. The area offered little guidance, until I stumbled through a red door and entered a vast hollow space. And there at last he was, the captain. Or rather what was left of him. No longer human, no longer even pretending to be. A monster, twisted, corrupted, cloaked in chaotic power. His voice was gone, his identity lost. The same man who had destroyed the camp, murdered his own people, and disappeared into the island's heart, now stood before me. He launched a rapid wind-based magic, but like so many bosses in this game, he had one fatal flaw. Circle strafe, spam spells, win. And that's what I did. It felt less like a climactic duel and more like routine cleanup. This should have been the moment, a culmination of everything. Narrative tension, emotional stakes, the arc of vengeance. But it wasn't. The boss was just another enemy with slightly higher stats. And when it was over, he escaped. Again. Flying off into the distance. No closure, no payoff. My reward? A new attribute ring. Clarity. Which supposedly reduces spell concentration time and boosts mana regeneration. But mana in Eternal Ring only regenerates when you kill something. So unless you're on a murder spree, it's not exactly a game changer. I pressed forward and to my surprise found a familiar face. Turban Man. Alive. He told me something strange, something important. Anyone who doesn't understand the true story behind the Eternal Ring becomes cursed. He said the Aldine invaders, the Socians, even the people who once wielded magic, all fell to this curse. They chased the eternal power without truly understanding it, and if I failed to learn the truth, I'd end up like him. He spoke of someone I needed to meet, a figure he once served, back when he was still part of Aldine, 20 years ago. But this person, he warned, no longer looks the same. Finally, he urged me, one last time, to find Lyla, because if we can't, we may begin to change too. The next leg of the journey takes place in, you guessed it, a volcano. Rivers of lava, oppressive heat, and towering red-skinned orcs that look like they've been carved out of gym equipment. Despite their build, they didn't swing their axes much. Instead, they hurled magic at me. One of them knocked me into lava, and once again, I was reminded that environmental hazards have probably killed me more times in this game than any actual enemy. Deeper into the volcano, I came across a sealed door, stone-carved, ancient, glowing with mystical text, sealed by magic. I fired a wind cutter at it out of instinct, and it opened. It was a small, quiet moment. No cutscene, no lore dump, but it carried huge implications. Only someone born with magic could open these doors. Only a Socian. And it's here that the game reveals something important, not through story, but through gameplay. Kain's heritage isn't just told, it's used. These doors aren't just barriers, they're mechanical affirmations of Kain's bloodline, of who he is, of what he was always meant to uncover. More doors followed, more quiet confirmations, each one reinforcing the truth I was already beginning to accept. Kain is Socian, not just a wanderer, but a descendant of those who once ruled this island. Eventually, I stumbled across a new figure, another cursed soul, twisted and barely clinging to identity. He mistook me for someone named Nell, and I have to say, he kind of looks like elemental hero Neos from Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. His name? Matthew D. Ross III, once king of Aldine, now a mutated shadow of who he used to be. He explained the tragedy. After defeating the Socians, his forces were cursed by a cheat spell, one that twisted them into monstrous forms. His most loyal knight, Nell, had been trying to undo the damage. Here was a man who had conquered, only to become the victim of his own ambition. Cursed, trapped, forgotten. And then, mid-sentence, a dragon bursts out of the lava and obliterates him on the spot. No boss fight, no final monologue, no dramatic death scene. Just instant death, and then he despawns. It's tragic, it's abrupt, and it's also, in a very dark way, hilarious. But there's no time to linger. A voice calls out, leading Kain forward. A silhouette appears in the distance. Human, maybe. As we get closer, we meet her, Lyla. She introduces herself as the last of the Elysians, the ancestors of the Socians, the original wielders of magic. And suddenly, everything begins to fall into place. She tells us the fire dragon, the very beast that just killed a king, is no longer conscious. It acts only on instinct, on chaos. It is beyond reason now. And then the second reveal lands a heavy emotional blow. The fire dragon is her father. Kain barely has the time to process this as Lyla shields him from a sudden burst of flame, calling out to her father, pleading with the remnants of who he once was. But it's too late. The dragon doesn't stop. The blast sends them both flying, Kain and Lyla, swallowed by light and flame, falling deeper into the island's core. We arrive in what appears to be an ancient lab, 4 glowing pedestals, each tied to a familiar element: fire, water, earth, and wind. It feels like a puzzle, or maybe a trial, but its mystery is more aesthetic than functional. The next boss? A giant rainbow-shooting cockatrice. A mythical chicken beast that looks like it's wandered out of a different game. It's large, loud, and kind of easy. Like most enemies in Eternal Ring, it falls to the classic strategy of circle strafe, stab, repeat. After defeating the beast, we press forward and emerge into fog-drenched ruins. A new zone that feels half forgotten. The ground is fractured, the air is thick, everything feels on the edge of collapse. Enemies swarm from all directions. Flying bird archers, animated armors, and those terrifying werewolf things that charge at you with zero hesitation. And somewhere in the chaos, I find a new sword, which in Eternal Ring is cause for celebration. They don't hand out new weapons very often. But here's the thing, Eternal Ring rarely challenges you through mechanics. The difficulty doesn't come from enemy intelligence or clever design. It comes from volume, from the game's awkward control scheme, and from the simple fact that you're almost always outnumbered, never outsmarted. Eventually, I find my way to a massive stone gate, leading into another structure. Inside, I discover a solitary figure, sitting in stillness. His name is Nell Grey, a former retainer to the King of Aldine, and it's here that the truth comes to light. The Eternal Ring isn't a ring, it's a prison, a cage designed by the ancient Elysians to contain a force too dangerous to destroy, a last resort. Sealing power away not out of weakness, but out of fear. Nell confirms what's been hinted at for hours now. Kain is Socian, so is Nell. They are kin, in blood if not in belief. And Nell's story? It's tragic. Born without magic, bullied, cast out by his own family, his exile festering into something poisonous. He didn't start the war between Aldine and Socia for power or glory. He started it for revenge. Not on a kingdom, but on the family that discarded him. The Socians fled to this island in belief of the legend of the Eternal Ring, but the energy it contained began to transform them. They became dragons. The fire dragon, it turns out, was Nell's own brother, which means Lyla, the girl we met in the volcano, is his niece. Nell doesn't ask for forgiveness. He's not looking for redemption. He's waiting to die. But he urges Cain forward, because if the thing inside the Eternal Ring is released, the world itself won't survive. The Eternal Ring is not power, he says. It is the thing holding the end of the world at bay. After Nell, we face a gauntlet of elemental chambers, each home to a statue that springs to life. Defeating them rewards you with high-tier gems essential for crafting endgame spells. But these fights, especially against flying enemies, only highlight how deeply flawed the camera and combat system really is. It's not even frustrating, just exhausting. You're fighting the controls more than the creatures. Eventually, I find myself in a quiet space that feels almost sacred. A library. Floating fairies drift between the bookshelves, harmless, luminescent, ethereal. Naturally, I kill them. They drop nothing. Behind a locked door, I discover a Power of Seek ring, one of the best rings in the game. It allows your magic to home in onto targets. In a game where aiming is an act of defiance, this ring is a revelation, a rare instance of design grace, what we now call a quality of life feature. Introduced far too late, perhaps, but appreciated all the same. Teleporting beyond the foggy ruins, I arrive at a crumbling village. It's eerily quiet, like time forgot it, and maybe it did. The kind of place that exists more as an echo than a memory. At its heart stands a small home, Lyla's house. Inside, the walls are cracked, the air still, and then she speaks. And finally we get the truth. Not just about the Eternal Ring, but about everything. The Elysians, ancestors of the Socians, once attempted to create the perfect being, an artificial, immortal human named Solus. It didn't go well. Solus, designed without emotion, without the capacity for pain or sorrow, couldn't understand the value of life. Without malice or intent, he destroyed cities casually, innocently, like a child stepping on ants, unaware they're even alive. So, as creators often do when faced with the horror of their own designs, the Elysians sealed Solus away, not in a tomb, not in a weapon, but in a prison, the Eternal Ring. They fled the island, became the Socians, and moved on. They forgot what they had buried, but when war broke out, they didn't return for redemption. They came back for power, and they opened the cage. Solus responded the only way he knew how, with play. He turned the Socians into dragons, not out of hatred but amusement. A curse spread across the island, not as vengeance, but as a childlike act of cruelty, detached from consequence. Lyla's mother was one of those very few survivors. She adopted Lyla, raised her, passed on what history she could, and now Lyla is all that remains of their line. Then, mid-conversation, another tremor shakes the house, and without ceremony or explanation, Lyla leaves. Left to explore the home, I find the true sight ring, an item that reveals hidden objects, a welcome reward, until I realize what it actually means, backtracking. And this is where Eternal Ring stumbles, not narratively but mechanically. Its world design leans more maze than map, and if you're not playing this game consistently, if you've forgotten a door you've walked past 5 hours ago, this part becomes a slog. Thankfully, the game is short enough and the true sight ring is just usable enough that the pain is manageable. But it's still friction, like an old door that never quite closes, no matter how hard you push. Before leaving, I discover a journal written by Lyla's mother. It details the war, her fears, her decision to adopt Lyla, but then something strange. She writes that Lyla is friends with Solus, not metaphorically, literally. Following Lyla's trail, I enter a new cavern and meet an old face, the Water Dragon, now revealed in full as Azabar Durin, the former leader of the Socians. He confirms what we've long suspected. The Fire Dragon was Gil Grey, the great magician of Socia. And Cain? Cain isn't just Cain, his real name is Lynn Grey, the son of Gil Grey, the great magician. Wait, hold on, wait. That makes Lyla our sister. How did I not realize this until writing this script? I feel like I need to reevaluate a few things. Azabar continues. The tremors that we've been feeling throughout the game, they're not earthquakes, they're soulless. stirring in his prison, attempting to break free. To stop him, we'll need 4 elemental keys to access the Eternal Ring. Naturally, 2 are already in hand, fire and water. 2 remain, wind and earth. With the core pieces of the main story now in place, dragons identified, ancient truths revealed, and family ties sufficiently scrambled, I took a moment to reflect. And then I did what we all do, even when we promise we won't. I did a little snooping. Not full-blown spoilers, but just enough research to find out if Eternal Ring had any missable content. I was playing blind, yes, but I also wanted to get the most of this game in one go. Turns out, there's a small optional cave near the very beginning of the game, one I'd walked past hours ago, completely unaware of its significance. Armed with that knowledge, I turned around and began what may be the most Eternal Ring thing possible, a full backtrack across the entire game world. Luckily, there's a teleport panel just behind Lyla's house. It drops me off near the valley. Yes, that valley, the poisoned one. And yes, I got poisoned again. Because of course I did. What followed was a long, miserable pilgrimage, a greatest hits tour of suffering. Through the valley, reliving the slow death by status effect, past the tree hideout, back through the forest, across the ruins, back to the camp, now quiet, and back through the waterfall cave, and finally, I reached the beach. That tiny strip of sand where the game began. I carefully hugged the shoreline because water in Eternal Ring is still basically instant death, and found it. A sealed door, adorned with an emblem, a symbol that looked like light and dark. I equipped the Divine spell, a light-based spell, and cast it towards the door, and just like that, it opened. The optional dungeon greets you with a warm embrace. That is, if your idea of a warm embrace is blood-red walls. From the very start, the message is clear. Turn back or suffer. The monsters, tanky, high damage, but packed with dragon gems, the rarest and most valuable crafting materials in the game. I entered at level 28, armed with little more than optimism and the Divine spell, which quickly became my best friend. It was one of the few light element spells I had, and it worked wonders here, vaporizing anything that wasn't immune to it. The first floor, however, was brutal. It wasn't just dangerous, it was disorienting. A confusing non-linear maze filled with twisting corridors and identical rooms. My usual navigation strategy, follow the monsters, failed completely. Because here, the enemies respawned constantly. No breadcrumbs, no progress indicators, just endless noise. Eventually, I cracked. No shame, I used the guide. And then I did something I hadn't done the entire playthrough. I used save states. Why? Because this dungeon has no save shrines. If you die, you lose hours of progress. It's a test of endurance, not just skill. The second floor, surprisingly, was a relief. A green forest biome, visually refreshing and mercifully linear. Square rooms, simple paths. Honestly, a break I didn't know I needed. Then came the winter level. And this one, easily the hardest content in the game so far. I was greeted by a death knight, accompanied by monsters and his pet bird, which, of course, nullifies all magic. My go-to strategy of spell clearing packs of enemies was now useless. The only option was to kite and stab, one by one, with my sword. And let me tell you, it sucked. But here's where the game surprised me again. In the chaos, somewhere behind the fray, a cockatrice was launching rainbow magic into the battlefield. And weirdly enough, this awkward, forgotten boss from earlier became my MVP. In Eternal Ring, enemies can damage other enemies, and here, the cockatrice did just that. It kept hitting the group, softening them, even outright killing some for me while I scrambled to survive. My chicken ally, Rainbow Death from the Shadows. The final level of the cave mirrors the Waterfall Cave from the start of the game. Dim, damp, isolating. Rooms are segmented, monsters grouped into death chambers. 2 death knights wait in one room, guarding nothing but frustration. It took me 20 real-world minutes to kill them both. Then came the crabs, tanky, tedious, only worth fighting if you're farming Elder Dragon Fangs, which permanently raise all stats. Tempting? Absolutely. Worth it? Maybe. In another chamber, I encountered a chimera, instantly obliterated by Divine. It dropped the Kaiser Knuckle, the most absurdly overpowered weapon in the game. It lowers all my attributes except strength, which it nearly triples. My strength jumped from 57 to 127 instantly. At this point, I didn't need magic anymore. The only downside? No range. Against certain enemies like crabs, you practically had to sit on their shell to hit them. But then, the combo was completed. A monster, an albino Sahagin, dropped the animated sword ring. It causes every attack to strike multiple times, maybe 5 hits per swing. Suddenly, the rest of the game was a joke. And just like that, my miserable 3 to 4 hour journey in this dungeon became worth it. Eventually, I found the dungeon's final boss, a golden death knight flanked by 2 spirits, and yes, another magic nullifying bird. The spirits constantly launched spells at me. The boss could 2-shot me. If I got paralyzed, it was basically over. Without save states, I didn't know how long this fight would have taken. I just kept hurling myself at him until, finally, he fell. His reward? The Eternal Sword. Best sword in the game. It boosts all stats and hits like a truck. But honestly, compared to the Kaiser Knuckle and animated sword combo, it's a side grade, not an upgrade. Beyond his corpse, I find a teleport panel that returns me back to the dungeon's entrance. Now level 39, fists glowing, I began the long walk back toward the cavern beyond Lyla's house, ready to unlock the final elemental keys and face Solus himself. Beyond the cavern lies the next challenge, a towering structure. The verticality alone gives it away. Floor after floor I ascend, and almost immediately I realize something. I'm too strong. The Kaiser Knuckle and animated sword combo has turned Eternal Ring into a different game. Enemies collapse in a single hit. Their attacks, once a genuine threat, now feel like gentle nudges. The dungeon no longer fights me, it crumbles beneath me. What was once a slow, cautious crawl has become a victory lap. And sure, it's satisfying, but also a little lonely. The challenge is gone, and its place is just me, punching my way through set pieces like I'm speedrunning a power fantasy. Then I encounter the Wind Dragon, and suddenly the tone shifts, but not in the way you'd expect. This isn't a hard boss fight, it's just a bad one. The Wind Dragon soars high above the arena, completely immune to my overpowered melee build. The Kaiser Knuckle? Useless. So for the first time in hours, I'm forced to switch back to magic. But magic in Eternal Ring has always been temperamental. The Wind Dragon constantly knocks you back with gusts of wind, forcing you to constantly reposition yourself. It's not a fight, it's a game of hide and seek with a health bar. The Wind Dragon constantly dives down, reappearing at one of the 4 corners of the arena, forcing you to tediously locate it over and over again. You rotate the camera, you chase the shadow, you hope your spell lands. It's not hard, it's exhausting. Eventually, after whittling it down with low damage spells and camera wrestling, the dragon falls. It drops the wind key, and for a moment I feel something close to satisfaction, until I almost fall off the tower trying to pick it up. That would have been on brand. Another key down, only one remains. The Earth Key, the last piece needed to open the Eternal Ring and confront the truth waiting at the end of this world. With the Wind Key in hand, I return to the base of the tower and unlock a new path, stepping into a snow-covered wasteland. The air is sharp, the world muted. It's the kind of area that looks peaceful until you remember what game you're in. Almost immediately, I meet someone unexpected, a talking werewolf. He approaches slowly, deliberately, in that uneasy way NPCs do when they've been alone for too long. His voice is soft, tinged with something like regret. He says he was once a soldier of Aldine, now cursed and left to wander this frozen expanse. He warns me of a dragon ahead, one that was once kind, gentle, but now it sleeps, and has slept for 3 years, slowly unraveling its last shreds of humanity. His warning hangs in the cold air, and then he lets me pass. Yetis lob oversized snowballs, harpies swoop in from above, griffins circle high overhead. None of them pose a real threat to me, a final playground for the overleveled. And then inside a chest tucked between icy ruins, I find it. The Earth Key, the last piece, the final seal. The end is in sight now. As I turn to leave, the werewolf man stops me. There's a final request. one so simple, so quietly human, that it cuts through the snow like a whisper. If you find my mother's grave, tell her I'm living a peaceful life. No side quest, no map marker. Just a line, a plea, a memory being passed to a stranger. A moment of quiet in the game that has often spoken in riddles and roars. And with that, the final 4 keys now in hand, the Eternal Ring is waiting. Back at the magical laboratory, the 4 elemental keys finally slide into place. Stone pedestals shift. Ancient mechanisms grown to life. A staircase emerges, unfolding upwards like a breath held for centuries. I'm transported to a place I've been before, but now it feels different. The crafting chamber. We've visited it countless times throughout the game, fusing gems, building spells, experimenting with unknown systems. But now it's no longer just a workspace, it's a threshold. And there, exactly where he always was, is the old magician, silent, patient, watching. He reveals the final truth. He is not a man, not even a ghost, but a consciousness, a lingering echo of the Elysian people. He explains that our journey is nearly complete. We are approaching the eternal cage, the prison designed to hold Solus, the artificial god-child. He told us what the Elysians feared most, not war, not power, but what they created. The body and mind of a child can grow, he says, but only if given time. In other words, kill it while it's still weak. This isn't a boss fight, it's a warning. A last plea from those who sealed away their mistake, and now they've passed that burden to us. We're not just opening a gate, we're stepping into the final sin of a forgotten civilization. The game cuts to Lyla and Solus, and honestly, it's hilarious. After all that build-up, the sealed godchild, the eternal ring, the apocalypse, Solus is literally just a floating newborn. No halo, no wings, no towering boss model, just a magical infant hovering in a bubble. And the voice acting? Think Ike from South Park.
There are many seabirds that can be used as replacements for that baby bird.
Lyla's trying to teach him empathy, explaining things like right and wrong, joy and sorrow. Solus, he doesn't get it. He doesn't care. But when he senses me approaching, he tells Lyla he'll stay right here while she checks it out. I reach the final zone, and it's kind of a letdown. Rocky terrain, a pitch black sky, and not much else. It feels more like a placeholder arena than the beating heart of a dying world. I find Lyla, barely clinging to life. She mutters her final words. She wishes she had more time to teach him. And then, quietly, she dies. Yeah, she dies. Through the final set of doors stands the captain. Yes, that guy again. The one who's been flying away every time I beat him. He's here, again, and he still sucks. He hovers just out of melee range, so I'm forced back to magic. No big deal. I'll whip out Fire Dragon and Earth Dragon, my ultimate spells, and vaporize him. The real final door opens. Inside is Solus. He greets me like a whiny toddler, then he throws a tantrum.
Let me out.
And that boss fight is the most difficult boss fight in the entire game. I take a couple swings at him, and he dies. Or does he? A voice speaks telling Cain to return as his job has been completed. Cain walks off screen. Cutscene. We see Solus stir. He floats over to Lyla's lifeless body and tries to wake her, but she doesn't move. And in that moment, for the first time, Solus understands death. His expression changes, his form shifts, his balls drop. He begins to grow up, not just in power, but in understanding. And then it ends with what it began, narration.
A few days later, Cain Morgan returned to the Hungarian royal palace. King Ian, who had heard rumors of the unusual changes on the island of no return, asked Cain what he had seen or heard. Cain, unfortunately, could only report that the research team, including its leader Daryl, had been annihilated. The death of Daryl, who was also the leader of the Knights, stirred up controversy throughout the kingdom. It was the opinion of many that the elders should take responsibility for his death. And through this wave of populist sentiment, the people who were loyal to King Ian were able to regain a great measure of strength. Eventually, Hungarian rule was returned to the king. Once things had settled down, Cain Morgan departed for an unknown destination. But a few years later, he returned to Hungaria, accompanied by a man of unknown identity. King Ian welcomed Cain's return, honoring him with a new position as head of his retinue. And as Cain requested, the king treated the man of unknown identity as one of his vassals. Cain and the man remained loyal to King Ian, and the ruler's name is now recorded in history as that of a skillful and compassionate leader. The man who had arrived in Hungaria with Cain left following the death of King Ian, but it is said that time itself, not even the passing of decades, could change his appearance.
The cycle completes. A world once fractured by hubris, loss, and forgotten sins is given the faintest chance at healing. Not through war, not through magic, but through something a godchild was never supposed to feel: grief. Eternal Ring was surprisingly enjoyable, though by no means a masterpiece when stacked against the PS2's heavyweight JRPGs. If I had to score it, a solid 7 out of 10. And yeah, all 3 points docked go straight to its janky, borderline disgusting control scheme. Combat felt like a bare-bones prototype of what FromSoftware would later perfect. There's no stamina bar or parry system, but you still feel every dodge, every opening, every hit like you've earned it. The first-person perspective? Surprisingly fine. I usually get motion sick in games without an FOV slider, but somehow this one didn't bother me. The magic system? Brilliant in concept, crafting rings through elemental gems, but in execution, messy. Magic rings are too rare early on, mid-game gems are underwhelming unless you grind for them, and late game, the Kaiser Knuckles make magic feel completely pointless. I don't think I even crafted half the available spells. The story had more meat than expected, piecing it together through cryptic dialogue, environment clues, and ominous NPC mutterings felt engaging. Once Cain's true identity is revealed, the narrative actually clicks into place. Still, the body count is comically high, nearly every major NPC dies, and you do end up feeling truly alone. And that loneliness, that silence, that's where Eternal Ring shines. Much like the later Souls titles, there's no narrator, no guiding UI, just fragmented stories, a few groaning dragons, and the eerie hum of empty halls. Modern games stimulate isolation. Eternal Ring, it just drops you in it. Pacing wise, it's uneven. The adventure stays interesting, but backtracking is brutal, yet it also made the world feel heavy, not made for me, just there, waiting. That sense of distance is something modern games skip with fast travel, and honestly, I kinda miss it. As a FromSoftware relic, this game is fascinating. After Kingsfield and Armored Core, and you can see the blueprint here. Environmental storytelling, cryptic world lore, gameplay first design. This wasn't a tech demo. It's the skeleton of something greater. And would I want a remake? Absolutely. Keep the eerie tone, keep the fragmented mystery, but please let me use the analog sticks, overhaul the combat, expand the crafting system, smooth out the movement, and done right, this could easily earn its place as a cult classic once again. Combat, 6 out of 10, janky but oddly rewarding. Story, 7 out of 10, fragmented yet emotionally resonant. Exploration, 7 out of 10, confusing but immersive. Controls, 3 out of 10, basically a crime. Atmosphere and music, 8 out of 10, weirdly effective. Graphics, 7 out of 10, pretty solid for a launch title. Would I recommend Eternal Ring in 2025? Only to the curious, the patient, the kind of player who digs through forgotten relics just to see what still breathes beneath the dust, or anyone that's fascinated by FromSoftware's origin story. But if you're looking for polish, you'll bounce off immediately. But if you want something raw, earnest, and strangely compelling, a prototype for something legendary, then Eternal Ring might just be worth your time. Thanks so much for sticking around until the end. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this. If you enjoyed the video, or would just like to see more content like this, please consider subscribing. And if not, let me know what I could do better next time. I'm always looking to improve. Up next is another FromSoftware title, Evergrace. Until then, take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.